I thought I knew what family was. For years, I had lived in a house filled with the scent of home-cooked meals and the hum of everyday life. My parents had gotten married when I was just a teenager, and I was skeptical at first. I didn't think I needed another family. But when my dad married Maria, it didn't feel like some distant connection. It felt like a real part of my life. And when she brought her daughter Alejandra into our home, I thought, maybe this isn't so bad. First, everything felt normal. Alejandra was only a couple of years younger than me, so we didn't have much in common. Still, we would often spend time together after school. She was kind, funny, and she seemed to care about being part of the family. It didn't take long before we fell into a routine. We'd share stories over dinner, laugh at jokes no one else understood, and go to the mall together on weekends. I considered her my sister, my family. I wanted to trust her. Had to. It wasn't just about sharing a house. It was the feeling of safety I had, like everything in our little family was in its place. Maria and my dad worked, so it was often Alejandra and I who would spend hours together in the kitchen, talking about whatever we felt like. She was a good listener, someone I thought would always be there when I needed her. It was in those moments that I felt closest to her, like she understood me, like we were a team. She seemed happy too. We joked around, cooked meals together, and spent hours chatting about our futures. I never thought anything would change that. I never thought anything could shatter the image of family we had built. We were in the middle of preparing dinner one evening, a normal weeknight with the sound of sizzling meat and soft background music. It was in those simple moments that I felt the most secure. But that was about to change. Slowly, without warning, things began to feel different. Alejandra had always been a little more outgoing than I was, but I began noticing something odd, something subtle that I couldn't quite put my finger on. She started spending more time with my boyfriend, Lucas. First, it seemed harmless. He was a good friend of the family too. So, when she would joke around with him or tease him, I laughed it off. But then, the jokes started feeling more personal. I noticed how her eyes lingered on him a little too long, how they would talk about things that didn't seem to involve me. I tried to brush it off, chalking it up to my overactive imagination. Maybe it was just the comfort of them being close, just two people talking. But something in my gut told me otherwise. I couldn't ignore it. There was a moment when I walked into the living room, planning to join them, but I stopped at the doorway. I saw them sitting too close. It was subtle. His arm resting a little too comfortably on the back of the couch, her laughing a little too hard at something that wasn't that funny. My heart skipped a beat. I didn't say anything. I just turned around and walked back to the kitchen, trying to convince myself that I was being ridiculous. But the knot in my stomach wouldn't go away. That was the first time I felt it, the nagging suspicion. I thought it was nothing. After all, we had always been close, right? But as the days went on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Little things. Like how they would exchange glances when they thought I wasn't paying attention. The way Lucas started avoiding me just a little more, pulling away when I touched him, acting like he was busy. And Alejandra. She became distant too. When she used to laugh freely around me, now she barely said a word. I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to confront the possibility that the person I had come to trust so much, the person who I thought was my sister, could be capable of doing something so horrible. Still, the thought kept gnawing at me. I tried to push it away, thinking, it's just my mind playing tricks on me. But the more I tried to ignore it, the more the pieces of the puzzle seemed to come together. The way Lucas and Alejandra would share a secret smile, the way their conversations felt intentionally excluding, the way I started feeling like an outsider in my own home. Something was changing and I couldn't escape it. I could feel it in the air every time I entered a room. The betrayal wasn't something I wanted to see, but I couldn't deny that it was there, right in front of me. And deep down I knew I had to face it eventually. But the idea of confronting that truth terrified me. It would mean destroying the image of the family I had built, the foundation of trust that had once felt unshakable. And yet, I couldn't help but feel like I was already losing them, piece by piece, without even knowing why. The first crack in my perception of family had appeared. I wasn't ready for what was coming next. I couldn't keep pretending anymore. The weight of my suspicions had become unbearable, and it was time to face the truth, no matter how much it hurt. I had to confront them, Lucas and Alejandra. The longer I waited, the more toxic the uncertainty became. My thoughts spiraled out of control, imagining what was happening behind my back, wondering how far this had gone. I had spent too much time convincing myself that I was overreacting, but deep down I knew I wasn't. The truth was out there, and I couldn't keep running from it. The moment of confrontation came, and I found myself standing in the living room, my heart racing. I couldn't look at them both at once, so I focused on Lucas first. His eyes shifted, a mix of guilt and uncertainty clouding his expression as if he already knew what was coming. Alejandra, standing beside him, avoided my gaze. She was fidgeting with her hair, pretending she was unaffected, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. They both knew. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "What's going on between you two?" My voice trembled, but I didn't care. Had to ask. I couldn't live with the unknown anymore. They both froze like deer caught in headlights. It was the silence that gave it all away. Neither of them had the courage to speak immediately, and the pause between us felt like an eternity. Finally, it was Lucas who spoke. His voice strained, almost apologetic. "It's not what you think," he said, but his words only confirmed the exact thing I was afraid of. I could feel my hands shaking, but I fought to keep my composure. "Then what is it?" I demanded. "Because I've seen enough to know this isn't just some innocent friendship." Alejandra glanced at him, then at me, and her face flushed with guilt. Her lips parted as if she wanted to say something, but she couldn't find the words. I watched her, waiting, feeling a surge of anger and hurt rise within me. "Don't look at him. Look at me," I said, my voice cutting through the room. "I'm asking you both now. Tell me the truth." Lucas looked away, not meeting my eyes. The silence grew heavier, and I could feel my chest tighten. The truth was coming, but I wasn't sure I was ready for it. Alejandra's eyes finally met mine, and the look on her face was the one I had feared most. It wasn't just guilt. It was shame. And it was in that moment that I realized everything I had feared was true. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "We didn't mean for it to happen this way." Her words stung, each one a sharp reminder of how much I had been betrayed. I wanted to scream, to yell at them both, but I couldn't find the strength. The anger wasn't the first thing I felt. It was sadness, deep and consuming. It was the realization that everything I had believed in was a lie. Lucas tried to explain himself, his voice low and regretful. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," he said. "I never meant to hurt you." But I didn't care about his excuses anymore. His words were hollow, meaningless. He had made his choice, and so had she. I couldn't stand to hear more. For a moment, I stood there, frozen, the weight of their confession sinking in. The betrayal was too much to process all at once. My mind screamed for answers, but my heart already knew what I needed to do. I turned away from them both, the tears threatening to spill, but I refused to let them see me break. I didn't need to hear any more of their excuses. I didn't need their apologies. "What happened to us?" I whispered, barely able to speak through the lump in my throat. "What happened to the family we built?" My words were barely audible, but I knew they heard me. Alejandra took a step forward, her eyes filled with regret, but I couldn't look at her anymore. Not like this. Not after everything. I walked out of the room, not looking back. I didn't need to hear their answers. The truth had already been spoken, and I couldn't undo it. But I also knew one thing. I couldn't stay in that house, not with them. Not with the people who had torn my world apart. My heart ached, but there was also a strange sense of relief. The uncertainty had been killing me, and now I knew where I stood. I didn't need to wonder anymore. But the pain of knowing that my closest relationships had been built on lies was a heavy burden. The hardest part wasn't hearing the truth, it was accepting it. But in that moment, I understood that I had no choice but to face it. The pieces of my life were broken, and there was no going back.